Hi, fifth graders. I'm back with chapter 9 of Stolen Girl. This one is titled Michael. I knew that Michael was the only other Ukrainian student at Central School, but I didn't see him until afternoon recess. He was tossing coins against a wall with some other boys and caught my eye. He nodded and went back to his game. I saw him later walking home about a block behind me. I waited for him, but he was with the boys from earlier. He walked right past me as if he didn't know me, so I walked the rest of the way home by myself. Since I was the first one home, I began to peel some potatoes for supper. I had just filled a pot with water when there was a knock on the front door. It was Michael, a sheepish expression on his face. "So suddenly you know who I am," I said. "Come on," he said, shuffling his feet. "You didn't expect me to talk to you when I'm with a bunch of guys, did you?" "I don't see why not." I left the door open, but walked back to the sink. He followed me in and sat down on a kitchen chair, watching me peel the potatoes. "Want to go to the library?" he asked. I did want to go to the library, but I was still angry, so I didn't answer. "Are you going to cook them on low while we're gone?" he asked. I shook my head, but still didn't say anything. "You are going to go with me, aren't you?" I liked that. It sounded like an apology. I finished peeling the last potato, rinsed them all off, and put them in the pot of water. I didn't turn it on. Marissa had told me never to do that. "I can go to the library for a short visit," I said. "I'll boil the potatoes when I get back." Michael was silent for the first few minutes of our walk. Then he said, "Sorry for not talking to you before." I didn't say anything. I knew why he didn't talk to me. He didn't want to be teased, but it felt awful to have him treat me like a stranger. When we got to the library, Michael went right to a trolley of books that were waiting to be reshelved. "I discovered this a few days ago," he said. "All the best books are right here on this trolley." His eyes lit up as he pulled out a dog-eared novel called Black Beauty. "You'd like this," he said. "I read it last year." I took it from him and flipped through the pages. All text and no pictures, and the text was small. "I can't read this," I said. He should have known I had only taken out picture books so far. "It will take you a while to read it," he said, "but I think you would like the story." He grinned at me and then said, "It's a girly book." "But you liked it." He blushed a little bit at that, then shot back with, "It's got good action, too." He shuffled through the other books and found one on hockey, one on rocks, and another novel. "What's the novel?" I asked, grabbing it out of his hand. It took me a bit to sound it out, and even once I did, I couldn't understand it. "Freddie Goes to Florida." What does Freddie mean? "Freddie," he said. "It's a name, like Michael or Nadia. This particular Freddie is a talking pig." A talking pig? That made no sense at all. And what is Florida? "It's a place," he said, as if he couldn't understand my confusion. "It doesn't make sense," I said. "Pigs don't talk, and pigs don't go places unless they're taken by humans." Michael rolled his eyes. "Maybe you should read one," he said. "Freddie Goes to Florida" is the first in the series. Then you'd understand. They're hilarious. I've been trying to borrow this one for quite a while. "I bet you don't take those books to school with you." "You're right about that," he said. "The hockey book is for taking to school." I set Black Beauty down. It had too many words. "Can I try a Freddie book too?" "Sure," said Michael. "Let's see if there are any on the shelf." There were a few, so Michael drew out a copy of Freddie the Detective. "This was the first one I read," he said, "and it's really good." I flipped through it. Even though it was a bit thicker than Black Beauty, the print was big, and there were some pictures. Not quite a picture book, but not as daunting as Black Beauty. I breathed in deeply the wonderful scent of ink on paper and ran my hand across the page. Even the feel of this book made me happy. I am in my 4-poster bed in the German farmhouse. I should be asleep, but I am woken by the rumble of voices from downstairs. I get out of bed, shivering in my bare feet and thin nightgown. I slip down the stairs to see where the voices are coming from. The double doors of the library are open. Father is seated with a brandy in one hand. Other men, their uniform jackets unbuttoned, sit around the table telling each other stories and laughing. There are SS men. I know that because they have the very same badges on their collars as Father. But that is not what catches my eye. After all, I've seen them so often at rallies in the city and here for dinner parties. What I notice this time is the room they are in. It is usually close. This room is lined from floor to ceiling with books. mostly in German, but some in other languages too. Fat books, thin books, some with gold lettering on their spines. I love books. I long to hold them, but I am not allowed to touch these books. You remember earlier in the book when she talked about the library and being confused as to how you could just check one out? That's because she remembers this time where she wasn't allowed to touch books. I walk back up to my room and pull out from under my bed the one book Walter has allowed me. I turn the pages. The paintings are colorful and the print is large and clear. I want to love this book, but I cannot. It talks about Jews and how they are poisonous toadstools, but Germans are wholesome mushrooms. Something deep inside me tells me this is wrong. I think of that girl who wore the yellow star, and my heart aches. I close the book and shove it under my bed. We should be going, said Michael. Don't you have to put supper on? Suddenly, I was back in the library in Canada, in Brantford. I looked at Michael, then up at the clock on the wall. We had been at the library for an hour. We walked to the checkout counter with him with his 3 books and me with the 1 novel. I still felt a little bit like I was in a dream world. An older boy who looked vaguely familiar from today's recess was standing in line in front of us. He turned, caught Michael's eye, and nodded in greeting. He didn't seem to notice me, and that was fine with me. A few more people stood behind us in line. I didn't know most of them, but recognized Linda. She was with a girl who looked like an older version of herself. It had to be her sister. Once my book was stamped, I waited for Linda and her sister to be checked through. Michael tugged on my sleeve. Come on, he said. I thought you had to cook the potatoes. This will only take a minute. I know he didn't want to be seen with me, but this wasn't a boy from school. It was 2 girls, so what was the harm? He stood impatiently by my side as Linda and her sister had their books stamped. Hi, Nadia, said Linda. She glanced at Michael, then back at me. This is my sister, Grace. Grace was taller than Linda, but she had the same golden skin and glossy hair. So you're Nadia, she said, holding out her hand to me. Good to meet you. She smiled at Michael, then tilted her head so she could read the spines of the books he was holding. I didn't know you were a Freddie fan, Michael. You know each other, I asked. Grace and I are in the same class. Grace noticed the copy of Freddie the Detective in my hand. How can you read that? I looked at her in surprise. What had Lydia said about me to her sister? I knew my English wasn't perfect, but did she think I was dumb? Slowly, I said, forcing my lips into a smile. We stood chatting for a few minutes longer. I've got to get home and turn on the potatoes before Mauricia gets home, I said. We walked up the half flight of stairs together and out the children's entrance. Linda and Grace walked with us as far as Sheridan Street, where Michael and I turned, and they continued. Michael dropped his library books off at home, and then we both went back to my place. Once inside, I turned on the potatoes. Then we went out to the backyard and sat on the cinder blocks. You have to remember to call Mauricia and Ivan your mother and father when you're talking to non-Ukrainians, Michael said. My heart skipped a beat. I always call them that. Michael rolled his eyes. You're so dumb you don't even know what you're saying. I was about to yell at him, but I stopped. He was right. I didn't just use Mauricia's name with Linda. Didn't I just use Mauricia's name with Linda and Grace? I would have to watch myself. Not everyone is perfect like you, Mr. Smarty Pants, I replied. This is serious, said Michael. I don't know where you really came from, but if you want to stay in Canada, you had better get used to calling Mauricia and Ivan your mother and father. I didn't say anything to that. I knew he was right, and I was surprised at myself for slipping up. At the DP camp, I never let my guard down, but now that we were safely in Canada, my past was forcing itself to be remembered, and my thoughts seemed to get all jumbled. I wonder if she's feeling a little safe too. At the DP camp, she said she was always on her guard because she wasn't safe. But here, she's slowly getting a home and friends, and so I have a feeling that she's not watching herself quite as carefully. Just then we heard a truck stop in front of the house, and Mauricia's voice calling out a goodbye to the other farm workers. I should be heading home, said Michael. Don't say hi to me at school, okay? I shrugged instead of answering. Maybe I would say hi to him just to get him angry. I think she should say hi. A few seconds later, Mauricia came around the back. She was carrying a heavy paper bag, so I scooted over and grabbed it from her, and we both walked inside. She took the bag from my arms when we got inside and tipped it over onto the table, spilling out a few giant tomatoes, then onions, a small cabbage, and some green peppers. At the bottom were half a dozen big, beautiful apples. I'll make apple squares for dessert, she said, her eyes sparkling. She seemed to notice what I was wearing for the first time. You changed, she said. Then she looked at my unbraided hair. And you took your hair down. We put the vegetables and some of the apples away in silence, and Marisa prodded the boiling potatoes with a fork to see how done they were. How was your first day at school, she said. I took a deep breath and held it. I needed to tell her right now what had happened, to clear the air and not hurt her feelings. But I couldn't get the words out. Mauricia's forehead crinkled in a frown. Then she took a paring knife from the drawer and began to peel one of the apples. I watched the peel of apple skin grow. I had seen her skin an entire apple by paring off a single long tendril. Ivan couldn't do that, neither could I. The silence between us grew. I got the dish rag and wiped off the counter. I got out the broom and swept the floor, even though it was already clean. She's just trying to distract herself from what she needs to say that she doesn't want to say. Mauricia broke the silence. I was telling the girls at the farm today about the outfit I made for you. I didn't trust myself to say anything, so I caught her eye and tried to smile. They told me that students don't dress like that in Canada, she said. The apple was peeled, so she set it down on the counter and wiped her hands with a cloth. Did you have trouble today? I love the new clothing. I stared at the floor and couldn't say any more. My throat was choked with tears. Mauricia stepped toward me, took the broom from my hands, and set it against the wall. She held me tight, and I exhaled. I could feel the tension and worry leave with that long-held breath. I rested my head on her chest and wrapped my arms around her waist, sinking into her warmth and the scent of apples, sweat, and straw. I breathed in deeply, but I still couldn't speak. She rocked me gently and murmured, "It's fine, Nadia, don't worry. You're safe now." The words soothed me, and with them came an image of another mother holding me and soothing me. Another time, I thought I was safe. That night in bed, I tried to remember more about the other time, another mother, but it was like trying to catch my shadow. I couldn't fall asleep, so I turned on my lamp, squinting at the sudden brightness. Once my eyes got used to it, I grabbed the Freddie novel and propped myself up on my pillow. On the cover was a pig wearing a cap, looking through a magnifying glass. Page 1 began. It was hot. That much I could read. I tried to sound out more. The story seemed to be about 2 ducks looking at a house in the heat. It didn't make sense. Maybe if I wasn't so tired, it would make sense. I set the book down and got the Picture Dictionary for Children. I had gone through the whole book 4 times, and each time I did, I would find something new. This time, as I flipped through it, I kept on noticing the same couple of pictures that were used for various words. For example, the words automobile, drives, and parks were all illustrated with a fancy car. It wasn't colored in, but in my imagination, it was a shiny black car. The picture for burn was a house burning down, and the same burning house was used to show both destroy and fire. My nostrils filled with the memory of smoke. How many times had I seen burning buildings? It was so familiar, yet who was I and where was I when these things had happened? This was yet another piece of the puzzle that didn't fit. I closed the book and waited for my heart to stop pounding. I didn't turn off the light. I am in the back seat of a long black car, dressed in pink finery. The doors are locked and the windows rolled up. I look out the window and through the haze of smoke, girls and women running from a burning building. One girl glances my way. It is like looking into a mirror. She calls something to me, but she's pushed away by a man in uniform. I pound at the window and pound at the door. Let me out, let me out. The book slid off my chest and fell to the floor with a thunk. I jumped awake. The lamp was still on. I was safe in my bedroom in Canada. My head still swam with the nightmare. I rubbed my eyes and the image disappeared. I had been safe in the car and the fire was outside. Why had I wanted to get out? And who was the girl who looked like me? Was it just a trick or a dream? Or did this really happen? I feel like at this point, she just can't make sense of these memories she's having. She just says that she can't grasp them. She can't hold on to them to really remember what happened. We'll have to keep reading to see if she does. See you next time.